right, guys, when it comes to this next round of stimulus negotiations, looks like Senator Joe Manchin is holding up more than just the infrastructure bill. We're going to talk about it in details, as well as, yes, more checks are going out this week where you're going to get all facts, no fake, no phony, and no fluffed up information when it comes to what's going on in politics as well as stimulus negotiations. And if you're interested in getting this information on a daily basis, well, you've made it to the right channel. Yes, once again, as we've been talking over the past few days, since Senator Joe Manchin has changed his mind from out of nowhere when it came to this infrastructure bill, looks like a lot of Democrats have turned on him, including Senator John Yarmuth, who explains why is it so important for Joe Manchin to get on board at this critical time.
Congressman Yarmuth, great to see you. Welcome to the Sunday Show.
Good to see you. Thanks, Jonathan. Good to be with you.
All right. So let me get your reaction to your colleague, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, and her reaction to Joe Manchin. Is that helpful in this whole process?
Well, none of this is really helpful. And one of the things that I've asked to kind of rhetorically about Senator Manchin is, what does he think he's accomplishing? He's basically trying to tank this entire effort, Biden administration. But more importantly than that, he's trying to be an impediment to things that the American people desperately need and totally support. Mm-hmm. So I don't know which of these things he thinks are not important to the country: childcare, senior care, dealing with climate change. He probably doesn't think that's really all that important, although there's plenty of flooding in West Virginia. And the child tax credit, many other things that are in this Build Back Better plan. So I think, Senator Manchin says that he just wants to make sure that West Virginia has a seat at the table. That's all well and good, but that doesn't mean he gets to order for the rest of the country. Mm-hmm. And what he got he got 290,000 votes. That means his constituency is less than 1/10 of 1% of the entire country. So I think what he needs to do is consider his greater obligation, and that is to men and women and children across this country and to future generations who are going to be suffering from 100-year-old schools for an inferior trained workforce, a climate that is uninhabitable. I mean, these are all the things that are at stake right now. So if he wants to put a pause on these, as many other people have said, Mother Nature is not putting a pause on climate change. Well, so to me, I don't know what the answer is. It's not his fault he is in this position of power, but I think it is his fault if he doesn't recognize his greater obligation.
Well, Congressman Yarmuth, Senator Manchin was on Meet the Press, and he said, quote, "We don't have an urgency," which is why he's still calling for a pause. And yet this flies in the face of what I believe is a Wednesday deadline for bills to be written, at least in the House, to move this forward. I mean, let's just say that there isn't any urgency. What's your pushback to this idea that there's no urgency?
Well, again, I think it depends on whether you mean a few days or weeks, or whether you're talking about a year or several years. Clearly, there's probably not an urgency that next Wednesday or next Friday. Although the schedule that we have is important because we're coming up against the end of the fiscal year, and we want to get many of these things done in time to begin the process of implementing many of these programs. And you have to remember, if we don't pass these until next year, these programs take several years to implement. We're not going to have universal child care available the month after we pass these bills. The same with all of the elements of the program. So, yes, there's a sense of urgency because we can't wait 4 years to start dealing with climate change. We can't wait 4 years to begin providing free pre-K education to America's children. This to me, is the most critical thing we can do to make sure we have a sustainable future, educate our kids. So, yes, a matter of days, no problem. A matter of months or years, then we get into a further delay of implementation. and there's no time to waste.
Congressman, you just mentioned a moment ago in that answer about the need to, fund the government. You are coming up on a whole lot of deadlines, as we see here. By September 30th, you got to fund the government, you got to raise the debt ceiling, you have to pass emergency disaster aid, you got to do the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and do the $3.5 trillion reconciliation.
Now let's take a second to pause this interview and just take a look at the to-do list that Congress has. The first thing that we notice is that Congress has until September 30th to get these bills passed. The first one is funding the government. Yes, the government can shut down once again. If they don't do an extension like they did over the last couple of years into December, it could shut down on the 1st of October. That means anybody that is in a federal employee or receiving federal funds, it could be held up. However, those of you that are on Social Security, SSI, SSDI, retired railroad veterans, disability, retirees, you individuals, including survivors, your money will not be impacted because Social Security already has a kitty put to the side for you guys just in case anything like this ever happens. So once again, just in case you guys are wondering, if government shutdown will impact your payments as a person that's retired and on Social Security or on SSDI, it will not impact you, but it will impact a lot of federal employees. The next thing that Congress has on this plate that it has to focus on is raising the debt ceiling. The Democrats want to do that, but yet there are individuals such as Mitch McConnell and Joe Manchin, who's not even a Republican, who's holding up the votes to be able to get this passed through to raise our national debt to where the government has more money that it'll be able to use starting next year. Another thing that they have to focus on is passing the emergency disaster aid. There are 2 hurricanes. The next thing that they are talking about that Senator Joe Manchin could be holding up in regards to this infrastructure bill and even more is the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Remember that the infrastructure bill is broken down into 2 parts, the family part and the rescue part. The rescue part has already been voted on by Congress. That's the $1.1 trillion, $1.5 trillion budget for railroads, for streets, for Wi-Fi, all these things. That's what that 1.1 is for. This other 3.7 stimulus infrastructure bill that goes towards you and families and programs that have to do with retirement, programs that have to do with assisting Social Security, programs that'll help families, as well as another round of stimulus. All these things will be going off into that larger budget that Joe Manchin is holding back. All these have to be voted on by the 30th. If it is not voted on by the 30th, everything basically goes back to square one, and both bills are washed away, and they'll have to start from scratch, even with the Senate putting it together as a proposal, making it into a plan and a bill. All of it has to be done all over again if Joe Manchin does not step up over the next couple of days.
Are you going to be able to do all of these things by September 30th?
Well, clearly we have to do something to fund the government. We're not going to allow a government shutdown. We've seen the disastrous effect that it has on the economy just within the last 10 years on a couple of occasions. We cannot afford to let the debt ceiling be breached because we're not going to let the full faith and credit of the United States government be in question. This is something that is bizarre to me. My Senator Mitch McConnell is running around the state taking credit for money that's come back to Kentucky, and that he takes credit for passing the CARES Act a couple of years ago, and yet now he doesn't want to pay the bill. I mean, this is kind of the Trump school of business: incur debt and then don't pay for it. So I don't really understand what the issue is here. I've heard Mitch on many occasions say, we're not going to let the country default. And now he says, Democrats have to make sure it doesn't. Well, this is just the height of partisan irresponsibility. But to answer your question,
real quickly,
we'll get the government funded, we'll get the debt ceiling raised, and we're going to vote week after next on the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and presumably we'll vote on the Build Back Better Act as well, because
Okay.
we had made an agreement that we would pass both of them.
And that's why many senators are extremely upset and extremely disappointed that Joe Manchin, from out of nowhere, for some reason only he knows, even though other Democratic senators are speaking out against Joe Manchin, Bernie Sanders still believes that there is enough time for Joe Manchin to change his mind, and he believes that he will. We'll see what's going to take place with that. I don't know, but right now we hope that he does. Now, when it comes to who's going to be receiving checks next, the next group of checks that are going to be going out is on the 15th, which will be tomorrow. So tomorrow, the next round of checks will be going out as far as child tax credit payments. Make sure that your information is updated in the new IRS portals. If you have a new dependent in your family, meaning that you had a child over the past couple of weeks, meaning that you may have had a new child enter to your home or newborn baby enter to your life. At the end of the day, they should be looked up on as dependents as well. Now, if you are losing dependents, for example, if you are a grandparent on SSI, SSDI, or just a retiree, and you are taking care of your grandchildren, and maybe you have 3, but 2 of them went home to be with their biological parents, you're still with 1. You want to make sure that they are not sending you a check for 3 young people when you know you only have 1, because that can come back to bite you, and they'll be expecting you to return that money. I'm on my way to the comment section. I'll meet you guys there. And if I don't get a chance to speak to you and you don't get a chance to speak to me, we're not going to fret about it, because I'll be speaking to you again.